we asked Mayoral Committee member Councillor J.P. Smith to give us insight into the city's camera response unit, which has the largest CCTV footprint in Africa. Councillor Smith, we're in your nerve centre in the CBD. What does the centre do?
This centre monitors the CCTV cameras for the City Bowl and surround. And as such, if we're talking about inner city safety, is where what the cameras see is responded to by the Metro Police's camera response unit. And so that's a little bit of what we're showing you tonight, so you can understand how the cameras help keep people safe. But the cameras are pointless if you do not have boots on the ground, and the boots on the ground in this case is very much a partnership between the South African Police, the Metro Police, the private security role players, and the City Centre Improvement District, who play a very valuable role. The private safety, the public safety officials that they have, the security guards, and also rent-a-cops, because Cape Town has a rent-a-cop program in terms of which the private sector and city improvement districts can hire police officers from us to work in a particular area. Those officers are the first responders in many cases and help make sure that we curtail issues like bag snatching and interpersonal crime, property crime, theft out of motor vehicle, theft of motor vehicle, etc.
What are the biggest crimes you are facing within the CBD area?
Predominantly petty crime. You need bag snatching, pickpocketing. Sometimes those go accompanied with a knife or otherwise. Theft out of motor vehicle, theft of motor vehicle, and then robberies on the increasing number of residential properties. But most of it is in the petty crime category. There are assaults and assaults GBH, so occasionally some people, especially when under the influence of alcohol, there's a lot of late night entertainment. When alcohol is at play, so too is increasing levels of violence or altercations between people under the influence of alcohol.
How big is the drug problem?
Long Street has a particular reputation for drugs. It's not the biggest crime generator in the CBD. That's the Grand Parade or the Station Deck, where there are larger numbers of feet. Crime follows feet. Opportunistic crime, which is what you're dealing with here, goes where the pedestrian movement and the commuter movement is. But Long Street does have a reputation and a problem with drugs. The tourists are no small part purveyors of those drugs. They buy, and as long as they buy, there will be people trying to sell to them. And their visitors are also often a little bit less street smart.
Your city clearly is embracing technology. You regard technology as an important facet of fighting crime. How far are you going to go?
There are some basic technology tools that no police department these days would be without. No police department in even a small city in any modern police force would roll out of the front door without computer-aided dispatch. It's a really core or basic policing tool. There is no way for a police chief to monitor and manage thousands of policing resources if he doesn't know where these resources are or what they're doing. The National Development Plan some years ago, as a key deliverable, said we had to modernize our police forces to be able to serve our public effectively. That has not happened. Computer-aided dispatch is essential. It's essential for the public to be able to get accountability, for the senior management to be able to get reports afterwards about how efficient were my resources, how many calls did we not respond to, how long did we take to respond to calls, what are we doing with our resources, and how effective are we. You can't measure that if you don't have these tools. Hand in hand with that goes CCTV in the partnership with the private sector, which means we are increasingly partnering with automated number plate recognition networks, about 700 cameras now in the private sector, where we share the feeds, the hits on vehicles of interest, suspicious vehicles, duplicate number plates, stolen vehicles, etc., where us and SAPS are able to tap into these automated number plate recognition cameras to respond, and that improves your ability to deal with house robbery, business robbery, and the syndicates, the crowbar gangs that perpetrate these on a very organized basis. It's an important tool in dealing with them. Neighborhood watches and community mobilization plays a very important role. We have the most robust neighborhood watch network in South Africa. We've invested a huge amount of energy, time and trainers. So there's Telegram and WhatsApp networks and groups they have We have a radio control room for them at the TMC, which monitors these groups and dispatches in response to them. And we will also ask them to assist with dispatches where they are first on the scene. Technologies like shot spotter play a role, the gunfire detection technology that allows us to listen to gunshots in Hanover Park and Manenberg. You will later be able to see them responding to such incidents if there are gunshots. That system means that it triggers not just at the TMC but also on the handheld devices that our staff have, because this EPIC system links to the handheld devices. So the staff are getting their dispatching instructions on their devices. So technology plays an important role, not as a substitute for police, but making your police more efficient, empowering them, giving the officer more information on the scene that he can look up without having to resort to his radio. And that also improves the safety of the officers in the process.
We've previously seen a turf war, especially amongst the security guys within the nightclub scene. How are you dealing with that?
You have a problem in South Africa that your private security is ineffectively policed and regulated. The situation we had in 2017 with an open conflict between nightclub security providers who were intimidating each other in the nightclubs in order to sell their services. That conflict saw security guards who should not have been working there, were not CIRA accredited, where the accreditation was not effectively or policed or policed at all, and where the city and the provincial government had to place a lot of pressure on SAPS to ensure that that policing happens. So I think there's a lack of teeth in the legislation. The Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority has very little investigative capacity and very little power once they make a finding. These are known defects and require improvements and augmentations in national legislation. And it lies at the crux of some of the problems we experience in the CBD with security companies and with drugs, because very often those private security companies, the bouncers working for them, are there to shield the drug dealers from policing operations and facilitate the drug dealers' turf within their clubs where the drugs are sold. So those are problems we have to wrestle with. This is a national problem. It's not limited to here. You know, I see the stories and the tales also in Joburg and eThekwini and elsewhere, where private security companies effectively fence off areas and control who comes and goes, profiling the individuals on their own criteria as to who merits entry into an area and who not. Those are basic violations of people's rights.
Councillor Smith, give us some of your success stories. How effective is this nerve centre?
Partnership, the city improvement districts, specifically in the Cape Town CBD, the CCID. We now have 36 city improvement districts across the city. They're a very important part of improving resources without holding the general taxpayer responsible for it. You do not want people in poorer communities paying for the improved security in a business node. The business communities are paying for that themselves. They're paying for that extra policing resources to top up the capacity there. So we are making sure that we have an equitable and morally defensible situation where you don't prioritize resources for more affluent areas. I can confidently say that we do not do that, that the bulk of our resources are deployed to our poorest communities, and where resources are increased in areas like this, it is at the cost of the private sector who are bolstering or improving those resources for themselves. So the City Centre Improvement District and their public safety officials are an important part of it. So are the rent-a-cops they pay for, that are law enforcement officials that you will see, for instance, in Long Street that are patrolling there, which are externally sponsored. And the partnership with our camera response unit, Metro Police, law enforcement, traffic, and the South African Police, of course, supported by technology, supported by the camera, supported by the EPIC devices that the officers wear, helps make us a bit more effective, and a very active business community who demand services, who when service levels start deteriorating, hold us to account, who will summons us to meetings in Long Street, in Loop Street, in Breer Street, and say we're not happy with this, is not good enough. The City Improvement District, who will hold us to account, and that does mean we are responsive. Homelessness, vagrancy, and the related issues are a big factor in this. And so we've recently opened the safe space at Kulenborg, which is a space for homeless people to be able to overnight safely and securely with access to showers and toilets. And this has taken the pressure off the streets in part, which means that we have fewer homeless people on the streets. And that also creates less of a space for criminals to hide behind, because very often the criminals will, amongst the homeless people, appear as a less dangerous threat when in fact they do pose a threat. For the rest of it, it's public education, civic education, reminding people that if you drink and you're intoxicated, you are vulnerable. We have run awareness campaigns in the past, even with billboards and video screenings through the safety lab in Long Street, where we showed people how the pickpockets work, how they complement your shoes, and while you're leaning down to look at your shoes, they're picking your pocket, how the card skimmers and scammers work, and running operations with the CCID to target those card skimmers so that they don't have unfettered reign on committing the crimes that they focus on, duplicating cards, skimming cards, stealing bank cards, and again, particularly the tourists are vulnerable in this regard.
Councillor Smith, you have a mandate of patrolling the coastline. Do you have a special unit to protect the coastline?
So the word mandate is important there because in fact it's not part of our mandate. It's a mandate we've acquired. There are many mandates that we've acquired because we've seen glaring deficiencies in the policing done around those areas where it is creating long-term sustainability crisis for the city. We have a situation where our marine resources, our protected marine resources, are being poached to the point where they will, within the next decade, not be sustainable, self-replenishing. We will start losing resources which future generations will ask us, why didn't you do something when you still could? The same goes around alcohol enforcement and the dangers around that, when we've identified alcohol as a major driver of interpersonal conflict and crime in many parts of our city. Gang violence, which when I became Maker member, the city didn't touch. We deemed that to be SAP's business. We didn't execute warrants. We didn't raid properties. We didn't apply for warrants. We didn't gather crime intelligence. We didn't manage informants. None of that stuff we didn't. We didn't have a gang unit. We didn't have a dog unit. We didn't undertake evictions of gangsters from our council properties. Those are things that we've led in the last 8-9 years because we understood that it needed to happen. And the same goes for rail enforcement. These are not mandates of the city. They're supposed to be the railway police, but we do them, and we've stepped into these gaps because we understand that if we don't do so, we will not be able to run the city sustainably. We have glaring deficiencies in key areas of enforcement, and to go to public meetings and tell the public this is somebody else's job is not good enough. The public don't want those excuses. They want to see you step up to the plate and do what you can, and in these cases we have very much done so.
Councillor Smith, your critics will say that you're investing a lot of time, money and energy only within the CBD and you're neglecting other parts of the city like the Cape Flats. What do you say to them?
I would say that proportionately the CBD is under-resourced with policing. If you look at the number of people that daily enter and leave, that we have purposefully not done that. We've purposefully not stepped into the trap of allowing where the media discourse is, and the media will drive you towards the CBD in Table Mountain. We've purposefully not prioritized that. We've looked at deployment ratios relative to crime threat analysis. If you look at a place like Gugulethu or Manenberg, where an incident ratio for crime is 1 to 300, more prevalent than in the CBD on the mountain, we've purposefully not redeployed the resources to where the media shout. The media themselves have a very distorted focus on the CBD and the mountain, and we've made sure that our resources stay focused where they are. So our neighbourhood safety teams, our gang unit, our metal theft unit, the stabilisation unit, the school resource officers, all these resources work exclusively in the Cape Flats, and in townships you won't see them around the CBD. So I can confidently say that our resources are where they need to be.
Councillor Smith, explain the reach of the camera unit.
So you have cameras from Gugulethu to Manenberg to Athlone to the CBD to Woodstock to Sea Point. The camera network grows by 20-30 cameras a year every year, paid for by the councillor's ward allocation budget. Our incoming mayor now, Dan Plato, has given us quite an additional chunk of money. And aside from increasing our Metro Police staff capacity over the next 3 years, which has given us 100 million per year for the next 3 years, which will grow us by about 1,200 staff, he's also given us quite a bit of extra money for our camera network. So we'll be seeing a very significant growth in our CCTV camera network, and that will be matched by growth in the camera response unit so that they can go do more enforcement work. We have the largest CCTV footprint in Africa at the moment, and we intend to keep that lead by keeping the installations coming every year and prioritizing those in the areas of greatest need in the city.
After the break, we take to the streets of Cape Town.